Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be taking you through the top 5 ways that you can overcome muscle building plateaus. If you have been stuck training for a while and have not been gaining any muscle, this is the video for you. And at the end of the video there will be a 6th bonus thing that you can do to ensure that you're not suffering from muscle building plateaus. It's its own entire way that you could be plateauing, and it's arguably the most important point within this whole video, so stick around to the end to see that. But without further ado, let's get to it. So, just before I get started, there are 2 different types of muscle building plateau. The first one is a temporary plateau, which is what I'm going to be addressing within this video, but it should also be said that there is your genetic limit. There is an actual maximum amount of muscle that you can build based on your own individual genetics. Unfortunately, you simply can't surpass that point. However, far fewer people are at their natural genetic limit than think. Many people say they're at their limit, but unless you have optimized every single aspect of your lifestyle for muscle building, you're not at your genetic limit. So take a look at the tips within this video to see other things that you could be adapting to bust through plateaus. You should always assume that you're at a temporary plateau. Now, temporary plateaus are caused by something called the law of accommodation. The law of accommodation states that if you do the same thing over and over, eventually you plateau and eventually you get worse. So when it comes to muscle building, building muscle is a reaction to a stimulus, and the stimulus is usually resistance training and some form of recovery. When you start training to build muscle, your body goes, oh, I've got to lift these heavy things. I don't think I can do that every day. It thinks you've got to do that to survive, so it gains muscle in response to that, but eventually that stimulus turns dry. You've had all the adaptations you can from whatever you're doing, and you will plateau and get worse. So in this video today, what I'm really going to be saying is the top 5 ways that I think you could vary or alter your training and recovery in order for you to break through plateaus because of the law of accommodation. So without further ado, let's get to it. And coming in spot number 5 is your training volume. Your training volume is the total amount of work that any muscle or muscle group is doing. It's the sets times the reps times the weight. You don't need to mathematically work out every single thing, but in simple terms, you might not be providing an adequate training stimulus to your muscles week by week in order to stimulate optimal muscle growth. Particularly this will occur if you are training infrequently. If you are doing a bro split where you train each body part once every week, once every 10 days, I promise you, you are not adequately stimulating that muscle with enough volume for it to constantly be growing. You are probably stimulating muscle building potential for about 3 days after your workout. After that, you're actually going to be losing muscle if you're waiting 10 days to train again. So that is why you might be plateaued. You might actually be building on a very micro scale, but building muscle for 3 days and then losing muscle for 3 days or 4 days or however long, and building muscle and losing and building, and of course that causes you to plateau. So my advice would be to train at least 2 to 3 times per week per body part. You could do push-pull legs, push-pull legs rest. You could do upper-lower rest, upper-lower rest. You could do a mix where you do upper-lower rest, push-pull legs rest. You could do full body rest, full body rest, full body rest, rest, depending how many days you have free and how long you can train per session. But what you want to do is amass as large a volume as you can that you can recover from per week. You basically want your muscle to have the biggest training stimulus possible to promote hypertrophy. So that is the first thing that I would address when looking at muscle building plateaus. The first thing you might need to address is if you're simply not providing enough total volume and total training stimulus to cause your muscles to grow. And coming in spot number 4 is your training loads. So the amount of weight that you are using in the sets for training. So within the fitness industry, there has been a massive debate over what rep ranges are best for hypertrophy. You'll have some individuals saying that you need to do heavy reps to build big, thick, dense muscles. You'll have other people who lifted much lighter, people like Arnold, who were known for high volume training with lots of sets and reps, people like Jay Cutler, who loved sets of 12 and sets of 15. My advice is do all of them. So the exact mechanism for hypertrophy isn't exactly known, but there is a theory that there are two different types of hypertrophy: myofibrillar hypertrophy and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Myofibrillar hypertrophy comes from lifting heavy, and the idea is that you increase the number of myofibrils within your fibers within your muscles. So you basically get a dense, grainy muscle. That has also been said within the bodybuilding world for ages. There is this colloquial advice that you need to lift heavy to get muscle maturity and density. And then there's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which normally comes from lighter, high rep pump work, so more traditional bodybuilding movement, and that is supposed to swell the cells rather than increase the number of myofibrils. That is said to be done at higher rep ranges. My advice to you is do both. Whatever you have been following, if you've been following Arnold Schwarzenegger's blueprint for bodybuilding and it recommends lots of 3 sets of 10, and you think that the optimal rep range for hypertrophy has to be sets of 10, you're not limited to that. Do all of it in your training. Maybe you start each of your workouts, you might have a push day, you might start with a heavy compound movement that you do sets of 3, sets of 5, sets of 8 with. You are going to have large carryover from that, and then you might do isolated work. So you might do individual chest, shoulders, tricep work with some more isolated muscle groups, and you could do them for sets of 15, sets of 20. I wouldn't go heavier than sets of 3. At that stage, you're more doing neurologically fatiguing work. Your nervous system gets fatigued. You have great strength adaptations, but it's not optimal for hypertrophy. You have a very low time under tension, and you're not fatiguing your muscles and your muscular system. You're mainly fatiguing your nervous system. And at the other end, I wouldn't go much lighter than sets of 20. At that stage, you're working on your muscles' work capacity, how fit they are basically, and their endurance. For optimal hypertrophy, I'd stick in the range of 3 reps to 20 reps. Vary all of your loads within your training. If you've been stuck to 1 rep range because you heard that that was the best for hypertrophy, try all of them. Varying up your training like that will apply a new training stimulus to you, and that might help you bust through your plateau by overcoming the law of accommodation. And coming in spot number 3 is your training intensity. So this is not the same thing as load. People often have said within the bodybuilding world, there has been the argument, should you prioritize volume or should you prioritize intensity? And what they're really meaning is, should you do light weights for lots of reps, or heavy weights, they're conflating intensity and load, heavy weights for few reps? The answer is simple. You should do heavy weights for lots of reps. Now, it's very hard, but that is what maximizing the overall amount of work that you're doing for your muscles is. That's why I suggest you maximize your volume, but also use sets of 3, sets of 5, sets of 8. Apply a large load as well, some heavy loads, some light loads. Apply as much of a training stimulus as you can to your muscles. But when it comes to what training intensity actually is, it's effort. It is how hard you are pushing. You should always aim to train hard. The reason for this is, the whole reason your muscles are growing in the first place is your body is adapting to something that it thinks it can't already do. What it does is it starts resistance training and it's going, oh my word, I'm gonna have to lift heavy like this all the time to survive. It's a survival mechanism. It's like, there's no way I can do this every day with the muscle mass I've got. I'm going to gain more muscle so I can keep doing this and I will survive. Then what we do is try and change up the training stimulus to keep sparking more gains and to keep gaining more muscle. But the entire fundamental point of your body adapting is in response to your training stimulus, is gaining muscle so it thinks it can survive. It's doing something beyond its capacity. However, if you're training very meekly, the body thinks, I can do that every day, no problem, with the muscle mass I've already got. There's no reason for it to adapt. It doesn't need to. Oh, I can survive fine. Yeah, I can go through the motions and do 3 sets of 10 easy. If you are not training with a high training intensity, you are basically wasting your time in the gym. What you should do is always ask yourself, could I have added any extra weight or any extra reps to the set I have just done? And if the answer is yes, do the extra weight / reps next time. Come on. Train hard. Give your body a reason to adapt. Should you train to failure? Yes. What you should do is try and maximize the training stimulus you can and then try and recover from that. If you're overtraining, which very few people are, they are normally the psychopaths who are completely training to failure all of the time and then they can't actually recover from it. In which case you might have to dial back your training a little bit. I guess that is for some people the reason that they could be plateaued is you're actually overtraining and you need to lower your intensity. But I am telling you, for 99.9999999% of the viewers, you are not overtraining, you are undertraining. You need to sufficiently stimulate your muscles with something beyond their capacity and give them a reason to adapt. So that is the next major thing that I would address within your training if you're suffering from a muscle building plateau is you need to work harder, you need to try and push beyond your capacity, and that is why your muscle's going to gain, your body is going to gain more muscle. And coming in spot number 2 is varying your exercises within your training. So if you kept up with my top 5 exercise series for each muscle group and each body part, you will have heard me say at the end of every video that the real #1 exercise is a mixture of exercises, and that is because of the law of accommodation. Because if you just do the same exercise over and over, eventually you'll plateau and get worse. So varying exercises can be a very effective way of providing a new training stimulus to your body. Now, what you can do is change up the entire exercise, or you can do variations of the same exercise. So if I wanted to grow my lats and I was doing lat pull downs, I could change to pull-ups, I could change to seated cable rows, I could change to one arm, single arm dumbbell rows and try and squeeze the lat. All of those are great changes. Or if I'm restricted by equipment, for example, in the gym that I am literally in now, I do not have a seated row. I do not have access to lots of other equipment. I do have a lat pull down. What I can do to keep sparking new gains with just one piece of equipment is make small variations on that one lift. So instead of changing from lat pull downs to low rows, I'll change from regular lat pull downs to close grip lat pull downs, or to wide grip lat pull downs, or to reverse grip lat pull downs, or to neutral grip lat pull downs. There are lots of different variations you can use, and all of them are applying a slightly different training stimulus to your body, and that will cause you to adapt. You will keep making progress, and that will help you burst through muscle building plateaus. And coming in spot number 1 is recovery / lifestyle. I've sort of lumped a lot of factors in here, but the last thing that people often address when they are plateauing and no longer building muscle is optimizing the rest of your lifestyle. When you're in the gym, you're training and you're sparking some sort of training stimulus, but you actually build the muscle out of the gym. It's when you are recovering that muscle building is built, and that is the other 23 hours of the day if you train for 1 hour. And that is why it is so much harder to optimize, because it is the ultimate test of consistency. Now, I don't think you have to be absolutely perfect. It doesn't mean going to bed at exactly 7 p.m. every day and getting up at exactly 4 and doing an ice bath and doing all of these different things and having chicken, broccoli and rice. A lot of these factors only make like a 0.5% difference. They're not going to get you the results you want. It is called majoring in the minors. You're focusing too much on these small things that make almost no difference combined. What you should be focusing on within recovery, I would suggest 3 main things. 1 is energy, 2 is protein, and 3 is sleep. So when I refer to energy, I'm talking about the energy your body has available to recover with. Now that could be either your body fat percentage, because body fat is your body storing energy as fat tissue. It's storing calories as body fat. Or it could be energy as in your caloric intake day by day. Rather than your body storing the energy you're having available as you eat. So for most men, an optimal body fat percentage to try and build muscle is around 15%, and for most women, it's around 25%. If you go higher than that, you're starting to just get fat. You can't see the muscle you're building anyway. It sort of defeats the entire point. But if you're lower than that, you might not have adequate energy to recover from all of your sessions and optimally build muscle. This is a massive mistake I see many people doing, is when they're first getting into the gym in the first year, 2 years, they're trying to stay too shredded. That is because that is the fastest change you can make. Building muscle is a very slow thing, and as I said in the intro, it's limited by your genetics. You can only build muscle at a certain rate. Getting lean, however, is literally just calories in, calories out. If you get in a 1,000 calorie deficit, you'll lose weight twice as fast as a 500 calorie deficit. You can just starve yourself down faster and faster and lose fat very quickly. So that's what people often want to do when they're getting into training at the beginning. They want to see the results, so they try and diet down and then build muscle from there. Now, I do believe in Maingaining. This is not me promoting dirty bulking, but I would try and get to a reasonable body fat percentage. Like I said, more like 15% body fat for men and 25% body fat for women, and try and Maingain from there. And then you will have adequate energy to recover from all of your training. Your body basically has excess energy that it can dip into at any time. Or the other side, like I mentioned, was if you're eating enough calories day by day. Either if you're somehow 8% body fat, but you're eating 3,000 calories a day, that's probably enough to recover from anyway. You must be doing a lot of cardio as well, or have some crazy genetics. But if you're suffering from muscle building plateaus, maybe not. And I think that the best thing that you could do is probably get a slightly higher body fat if you're trying to remain shredded. The next thing within recovery is your protein. This is very simple. I would aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That equates to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. If you are obese, you won't need to have quite that much, because it is more based on your lean body mass. You're trying to get enough protein for your muscle. And obviously, if you are carrying a lot of excess body fat, that is not going to require more protein. So maybe you only need 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, or 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight. But I recommend getting adequate protein, because muscle is made of protein. When you are recovering from the gym, it is protein synthesis which is helping you accumulate muscle. If you are not having enough protein, that is bad. And also, I'd try and optimize the amount of time you have muscle protein synthesis by spreading your protein throughout the day. For example, I have 4 meals over a 12-hour period, 4 hours apart. It's like 8 a.m. is my breakfast, 12 p.m. a sort of normal lunch. They're a normal breakfast and lunchtime. Then 4 p.m. another protein hit, and then dinner at 8 p.m. again. You start to spread your protein throughout the day. If you're having 100 grams of protein in one meal and then nothing for the rest of the day, again, on a micro scale, you're sparking lots of protein synthesis, and then eventually your body doesn't have any for a huge period of time. You're actually not gaining muscle for a 17-hour window. I don't advise fasting for this reason, because you're not spiking muscle protein synthesis optimally. Intermittent fasting or any fasting approach is not optimal for muscle building. And finally, the last thing for you to optimize in terms of recovery is your sleep. Sleep is massive. Sleep is the ultimate natural performance enhancer. You get better, faster, stronger, smarter. Literally, you're able to focus more. You're a better human. You don't get as frustrated. You're able to cognitively perform better. In the gym, you're able to focus better. You might actually be able to count the number of reps you do past number 5. Tell me if that's me calling you out on that, because it's certainly me. I'm like, what am I at now? But if you have enough sleep, you will also literally recover adequately from your workouts. You'll recover so that your next workout, you can train harder as well. Sleep is amazing. I advise aiming for at least 8 hours of good quality sleep. Check that you don't have something called sleep apnea. If you are a large person and you snore a lot, that could be sleep apnea. It could be your throat closing and you sort of gasp for air in the night. It can literally take decades off your life. It is so unhealthy. But if you wake up chronically tired, no matter how long you sleep every night, you might have sleep apnea. Go to a sleep clinic and check that you don't have that and get treated if you do. That is very vital. But in general, try and optimize the temperature of the room. This can be hard if you have a partner. They might want the bed really hot and you might be friggin' boiling and you need some cold air. Try and find some sort of compromise. There is like a bed duvet company now that does different heats for different sides of the bed, and apparently many people find that life-changing to try and optimize their sleep, but that is a massive factor that you should optimize in your recovery. Anyway, that is it for what I think will help you burst through plateaus. Now it is time for the bonus thing that could help you burst through plateaus, but really it is its own type of plateau in itself, and that is reducing your injury risk, not getting injured. Obviously, if you get injured, you're going to plateau. If you've had a minor injury, you might have aggravated your shoulder benching, you're going to have to take it easy for like 12 weeks or something. Suddenly, you're not training optimally and you're plateauing in your hypertrophy for any sort of pressing movement and you're dealt because it is injured. Or you could have a catastrophic injury, something like a leg break or a muscle tear, and suddenly, or like a tendon snapping, suddenly you have to go through a long rehabilitation process. So you should always seek to minimize your injuries. The main thing that you should do is seek out proper rehabilitation and injury prevention advice. I am not an injury prevention expert. However, there are 5 tips I have that you should use, and every injury prevention professional I think would agree with these in order to minimize your injury risk when it comes to the gym. The first one is warm up. You need to warm up properly. What you are doing is preparing yourself for the workout that you're going to do. It sounds very obvious. Your goals of the warm-up should be to get blood flow to the areas that you are going to use. So if you're going to do an upper workout, you might do some form of cardio for 5 minutes. You could do like 5 minutes on a bike, just pedaling around, getting general blood flow around the body. Then I suggest you do some sort of sport-specific warm-up. So if you're doing a push workout, it could be using the specific muscles that you're going to do within that workout, your chest, your triceps, and your lats to stay tight. If that's your first movement with a bench press, you could do some sort of light tricep push down, get some blood into the triceps and through the elbow joints, do some sort of pec flies or light dumbbell presses, get the shoulders warmed up and get blood through the pecs, and maybe some like light lat pull downs, something like that to get the blood through the joints that you are going to need and into the muscles. That is my advice. You should always warm up because that is going to physically prepare you for what you're about to do. The second thing that you should do is not ego lift. Ego lifting obviously is going to dramatically increase your chance of getting injured. Ego lifting is doing anything that is beyond your capacity. This is the main thing that's going to cause you to get injured. You are drastically increasing your injury risk when you do something that your body is not physically prepared for. Like I said, the role of a warm-up is to physically prepare you for the session you're doing. If you don't warm up at all, that's a form of ego lifting. You're doing something that your body isn't physically prepared for. You're just jumping straight in. But the main way that you ego lift is probably by loading something too heavy or by doing an actual activity that is a form of ego lifting. So if you're doing something like trying to climb a tree and backflip out of it, it could have absolutely nothing to do with the gym. That's a form of ego lifting because you're doing something your body isn't physically prepared for, and bam, you get injured. But within the gym, it could be something that you've done many times, but you just load it far too heavy. I had this a few weeks ago. I went for a heavy yoke. I haven't actually done yokes before. I ego lifted. I did something my body definitely wasn't physically prepared for. I lifted the heaviest weight I ever have with a 350 kilo yoke, but as you can see, I was absolutely not prepared to do so. It was a disaster, and I did in fact injure my lower back. Luckily, it was just muscular and it only lasted a few days, but it was a stark reminder to me not to ego lift. It was an absolute shoot myself in the foot moment where I was like, oh, I've just ruined all of my real training for the sake of this one sort of test. I wanted to try and hit a 400 kilo yoke just on a random day. It was not worth it. Don't ego lift. That's obviously going to increase your chances of getting injured. The third thing that you should do is not change up or increase specifically your volume or your load too quickly. So I advised within this video that you should try and maximize the volume you're doing that you can recover from, and you should try and vary the loads that you use within different exercises, different sets and reps. Cover all different types of loads to provide a varied training stimulus to your muscles to cause them to grow. However, I advise that you don't increase either the load or the volume on any exercise or the total volume of your workout, to be specific, by more than 10% from week to week. That is because if you do that, that is a too rapid a progression, and you run into the issue of maybe causing overuse injuries or just poor volume management. You're not physically prepared to do that much volume in a training session, or with load, you're not physically prepared to lift that heavy. It's basically another type of ego lifting. And within even a single session, you shouldn't make too big a jumps. This links back to warm-ups, but you shouldn't do the bar for 1 rep on bench, then 40 kilos for 1 rep, and then jump to 100 kilos for sets of 10 for your working sets. Whoa, you've just like doubled over. You've done 2.5 times the load when you've gone from 40 kilos to 100 kilos, and then you've done 10 times the reps. The overall volume is 25 times what you were doing when you did 40 kilos for a single rep. You need to warm up properly. You need to not suddenly vary the volume and the load too quickly, either within a session or from week to week. If you are going to do different loads, like I suggested, you might have been doing bent over rows for sets of 12, and you're like, well, you told me to do triples. What am I going to do now? Instead of going straight to triples and doubling the weight on the bar, you could maybe go to 3 sets of 10 the week after, then sets of 8, then sets of 5, and then onto your triples. Slowly build it up by 10% increase in load week by week, and change the rep range so that you're using a variety of loads. Obviously, you might have other sets that you go from sets of 12 to sets of 15 to sets of 18 to sets of 20. Don't go straight to sets of 20 and drop the load, because that's a huge increase in volume. So from week to week, you should adapt your training slowly. Don't suddenly do anything that your body is not physically prepared for. The fourth thing that you should do is vary exercises. Not only is this a great tool for helping you to bust through plateaus, but it is going to help you overcome overuse injuries and misgroove injuries. So if you don't vary your exercises up at all, you are putting the same strain on your joints in the same way, in the same time, over and over again. What it is like is, if you have a brick wall and somebody gave you a sledgehammer and they said, break through that brick wall anywhere as fast as you can, what would you do? You would hit the same brick or the same point of the wall over and over again until you bust through. That is like doing the same exercise in the same way over and over again. You put the same strain on the same joint in the same way over and over. However, when you do exercise variations, that's like hitting a different part of the wall each time. You're applying a strain, but it's spread in different ways across the joint, and overall, none of the bricks get knocked down. Overall, none of your joint is actually injured. You've managed to spread the load over the entire joint, ligament, tendon, whatever is required. Your exercise variations are going to help you not put too much pressure on one specific area. The second thing that I said that they'd help is with misgroove injuries. Misgroove injuries is if you ever do something outside what you have normally been doing. So if you've only ever regular benched all of your time, and then either you suddenly switch up exercises to an incline after 20 years of only benching, or you're doing a regular bench and then the bar starts to drift up towards your face, your form is breaking down, you're not pressing in the same way you normally do, the tension gets shifted, your elbows flare out, bang! Your pec might get teared. And the reason is because it was never physically prepared to press in any way other than the one exercise in the one form that you have done. So you need to try and vary your exercises to help reduce your injury risk, because it is going to help spread the load and spread the strain on all of your joints and ligaments, and make sure that you're physically prepared to press or move or pull in any single different direction. The final thing that you should do, the fifth and final thing to help you reduce your injury risk, is optimize your sleep. Try and sleep as much as possible. There has been a study that has found that people who slept at least 8 hours, athletes who slept at least 8 hours, had a dramatically lowered injury rate compared to ones who slept 6 hours or less. Not only is sleep amazing for enhancing your recovery and muscle building capacities and allowing you to be fully recovered to train properly, but when you come in after sleep and try and train, one, you're compos mentis, you're awake, you're not going to have any negligence injuries where you just weren't focusing and you injured yourself, but two, your body has fully recovered and is physically prepared to do the session that you're about to do. So sleep is essential. Also, a sixth thing, which obviously I said at the beginning of this, but is not one of my tips, is go and see a proper rehabilitation professional if you are injured. I cannot help you with that. I am simply here to help you get massive muscles. But if you are injured, don't put it off. Don't just rest it. When you rest, you get in an awful cycle of, oh, I've got some pain. I'll rest it for 10 weeks until the pain's gone, and then I'll come back and try and do what I was doing. But guess what? Your body's no longer physically prepared to do what it was doing. And what does that cause? Another injury. So you get in this awful cycle of like resting it while it's in pain and trying to then push it as soon as you come back. Or even if you try and come back slowly, you haven't properly strengthened the tendon or the ligament, you haven't properly rehabilitated it, it's going to get injured again when you try and push it at all. So I strongly suggest you seek proper rehab advice. That is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video and that you learned something. You should have done. Anyway, if you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, subscribe, click the bell, all of those good things. There will be a link in the description to my coaching services. If you don't want to have to bother doing all of the brain work, doing all the research, trying to program optimally for yourself, if you want somebody who's simply going to keep you consistent, get you massive, design a bespoke personal training plan based on your life, based on your situations to make sure that you can adhere to it, but also maximize your muscle mass, I am here. Check that out in the link in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.